What if I told you that everything you're afraid of losing was never truly yours to keep? That this life, your name, your body, your memories, is more like a passing breeze than a permanent home. And yet, it is beautiful because it passes. In this episode, we're not here to fight change. We're here to soften into it, to sit beside aging, not as something to fix, but as something to understand. We'll walk slowly through what it means to love with open hands, to release the roles we once lived by, to bless the life that didn't unfold, and to welcome death, not with fear, but with space. This is not a story of decline. It is a story of return. Return to silence. Return to stillness. Return to the vast, loving presence you've always carried inside. If this kind of gentle truth speaks to you, subscribe to Lotus Light Teachings and walk with us, one soft breath at a time. Part 1. When life slows down, the truth speaks softly. I used to rush through life. Now, even sitting still feels full. There comes a moment, not marked by birthdays or calendars, when life stops running beside you and starts walking a little ahead. You don't quite notice it at first. Maybe your mornings stretch longer. Maybe you pause a second before standing up. Maybe the house is quieter, but not because it's empty, because you have changed. The speed at which you once lived, checking clocks, chasing plans, being needed, being busy, now feels like something that happened to someone else. Not gone, not erased, but softened, like footsteps in snow. At first, the slowing down feels strange. You wonder if you're doing something wrong. Shouldn't I be more active? Am I falling behind? Is this what people mean by getting old? But Buddhism teaches something radically gentle. Slowness is not decline. It is awakening. Dove the world doesn't rush a flower into bloom. Why do we rush ourselves? Asterisk, asterisk. In the Dhammapada, the Buddha said, "Be like a tree, firm in stillness, changing with the seasons." And in your life now, a new season has arrived. Not the season of doing, but the season of being, of watching the sunlight move across the floor, of feeling the breath in your chest without needing to optimize it, of sitting with a cup of tea and letting it cool, without hurrying to the next thing. Because what if there is no next thing more important than this? Slowness reveals what speed hides. When you lived faster, you missed things. You didn't mean to, you just couldn't see them. Through the blur, the way your grandchild held your hand and didn't let go. The quiet ache in your chest after your friend moved away. The way your own body whispered, "Rest?" And you answered, "Later." Now there is time to listen, not because you're less capable, but because you're more available. To the moment, to yourself, to the truth you never had time to meet before. Person in lotus position, medium skin tone, aging as a spiritual practice. Most people think of aging as a medical process, but in Buddhist teaching, aging is also a spiritual unfolding. When the noise fades, the soul speaks. When roles drop away, the real self steps forward. When control dissolves, trust has a chance to grow. You are not losing your life. You are learning how to finally be with it. Crescent moon, a story. The Old Man and the Bell. There was an old man who lived near a monastery. Every morning, he walked slowly to the bell tower, though his legs hurt, though no one asked him to. He'd ring the great temple bell once, and then sit beside it in silence. One day, a young monk asked, "Why do you come here? The bell rings the same whether you are here or not." The old man smiled. "I don't come to ring the bell. I come because the silence afterward is different. When I have touched it." This is how aging feels when we stop resisting. Not empty, but full in a way youth never showed us. Prayer beads, a reflection for today. Touching the silence. Tomorrow morning, before speaking, before checking your phone, before even standing, place one hand over your chest. Feel your breath, feel your heartbeat, and say softly, "This moment is not waiting for me to do anything. It is already complete." Repeat it again, but slower. Let that truth wash over you like warm sunlight on an old stone wall. Nothing is missing. Just because I'm moving slower doesn't mean life is. Sheaf of rice, the gift of going slow is not less life, but more of it. Asterisk asterisk. You are not falling behind. You are arriving differently. You are beginning to notice what fast feet and quick minds always missed. Like the way the sky changes, minute by minute, without needing permission. Like the way your own body still holds breath, still gives warmth, still listens, even when you forget to. This is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of a quieter chapter. And sometimes, those are the ones we reread most often. In the next part, we'll begin to explore the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Impermanence. Not as a warning, but as a soft invitation to let life change without fearing what it becomes. But for now, just sit and let this moment be enough. When life slows down, the truth speaks softly. Part 2, the beauty of impermanence, why everything changes. I once feared change, but now I see everything that broke me also made me softer. There was a time when change felt like the enemy. You held on to people, places, moments, afraid they might slip away. And they did. They always do. But now, with time stretched gently behind you, you begin to see something else. Change is not cruelty. Change is the nature of love in motion. Impermanence is not the problem. Clinging is. Asterisk asterisk. In Buddhism, one of the core teachings is anicca, impermanence. Everything that arises will pass. Every body ages. Every emotion shifts. Every thought dissolves. Every cloud moves on. But that doesn't make life meaningless. It makes it precious. Because when you know something won't last, you hold it more tenderly. A cup of tea tastes sweeter when you know the warmth will fade. A hug feels deeper when you know you won't always have arms to hold. A sunrise means more when you know you might not see every tomorrow. This is not sad. This is sacred. Dove the falling leaf doesn't fear the ground. It dances. Asterisk asterisk. Imagine a maple leaf in autumn. It's no longer green. Its edges curl. It flutters in the wind, lets go of the branch, and floats. Does it fight? No. Surrenders. Beautifully. And we watch it with awe. So why do we fight our own seasons? Buddhism invites us to live like the leaf, not by denying change, but by participating in it, with presence, with trust, with grace. You are not being erased. You are being transformed. Prayer beads a story. The monk and the cracked bowl. There once was a monk who used a clay bowl for many years. One day it cracked. The younger monks offered to replace it. But the elder shook his head and said, "This bowl and I have aged together. I will keep it until it breaks entirely, and then I will thank it for every grain of rice it once held." He didn't see the crack as loss. He saw it as proof that the bowl had been well used, well loved, and real, just like us. Person in lotus position, medium skin tone, why trying to stay the same is suffering. Many of us, especially as we age, feel the pull to preserve our youth, our memory, our energy, our image in the eyes of others. But clinging to the illusion of permanence is like holding your breath and hoping it becomes oxygen. It doesn't. It becomes suffering. Instead, breathe. Let things change. Let your face wrinkle. Let your schedule slow. Let your opinions soften. Let your heart grieve and open again. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. Cherry blossom aging is not becoming less. It's becoming real. Asterisk asterisk. Think of a river, always changing, never the same twice, and yet, always the river. So are you. You've changed. You'll keep changing. But the presence beneath it all, that still aware, kind self, has been there through every season. You are not your body, not your job, not your past. You are the one who watched it all unfold. And that you has never been broken by time. Candle a practice for honoring impermanence. Each morning for a week, write down one thing that's changed. A habit you used to have, a person you no longer see, a belief that softened, a part of your body that feels different. Then place your hand over your heart and say, I honor what was. I release what no longer is. I trust what is becoming. This is not letting go out of grief. This is letting go out of reverence. Crescent moon, let change be your teacher, not your enemy. The seasons teach us how to die and be born again. Every year, the moon teaches us how to shine. In phases, the waves teach us how to rise and fall, without apology. So what is life trying to teach you, right now, in this changing body, in this softer pace, in this new kind of quiet? Maybe it's saying, you don't need to stay the same, to stay beautiful. In the next part, we'll explore how aging invites us to release not only the past, but the roles we used to live in, and how shedding those identities can actually bring us home to who we really are. But for now, sit by the window, watch something change, a shadow, a breeze, a bird flying off, and smile. Asterisk, it's okay to change. Everything does. And that's what makes it real. Part 3, letting go of the roles you used to be. I was a mother, partner, a helper. I was someone everyone needed. But now, I'm learning to just be someone who is here. All your life, you've carried names. Not just the one given at birth, but the names people called you through the years. Mom, Dad, the strong one, the reliable one, the funny one, the one who holds everything together. These weren't lies. They were real. They were worn like favorite coats in winter, comforting, familiar, essential. But now, they begin to feel a little heavy. Maybe your children don't call as much. Maybe the job no longer needs you. Maybe the house is quieter, and no one is asking what's for dinner. Maybe the mirror shows someone who no longer fits into the name strong like before. And so you wonder, if I'm not who I used to be, then who am I now? Buddhism says, you are not your roles. You are the awareness beneath them. Asterisk, asterisk. In Buddhist teachings, the self is not a fixed identity. It is a flowing experience, ever-changing, ever-shifting. What you called you was always a collection of parts. The daughter who tried to please, the father who tried to provide, the spouse who tried to understand, the worker who tried to matter. All of these were roles, and like any good performance, they eventually end. But the stage itself, the space of awareness, remains. That's who you truly are. Of a story, the actor who forgot his lines. There was once a famous stage actor who, in his older age, began to forget his lines. At first, he tried harder, rehearsed longer, pushed himself, but the forgetting kept coming. One evening, he stepped onto stage and forgot everything. He stood in silence. The crowd waited. Then, he took a deep breath and said, asterisk, I am not here to be anyone tonight. I am here to be with you. Asterisk. And in that moment, the theater fell still, not out of confusion, but reverence, because what people wanted was never the performance. It was presence. Chief of Rice, the pain of losing roles is not failure. It is space being made. Asterisk, asterisk. When you are no longer the one they need, can feel like being forgotten. But what if you are simply being invited into a new relationship with yourself, not as a doer, not as a fixer, not as a role, but as you, the one who watches the clouds, the one who listens to birds, the one who sits quietly and finally feels enough. Prayer beads a practice. Sitting without a name. Try this simple meditation. Close your eyes, let your breath slow, and imagine setting down your roles one by one. I am not the parent right now. I am not the problem solver. I am not the memory keeper. I am not even the one who is aging. Just sit, with no role, no title, no expectation, and notice what remains. It may feel like emptiness, but look closer, and you'll see its freedom. Cherry blossom, you are not disappearing. You are becoming whole. Asterisk, asterisk. People may no longer call you what they used to. They may stop needing you like before. But you are not less. You are simply returning to a version of yourself that existed before the world gave you names. A still, aware, gentle presence. And now, in this season of your life, you get to rest in that. No performance, no proving, just being. Person in lotus position, medium skin tone, a question to hold gently. Before sleep tonight, ask yourself, who am I when I'm not trying to be anyone? Not to answer with words, just to feel into that space. You might find something unexpected. I am not the role I played. I am the quiet that held it. In the next part, we'll explore what it means to befriend the changing body, not with resistance, but with reverence. Because aging is not the loss of vitality. It is the invitation to listen more deeply. But for now, take off the costume, let the stage go dark, and breathe. Asterisk, I am not what I was, and that is not a loss. That is a homecoming. Asterisk, Part 4, accepting the fading body without losing the light. My body doesn't move like it used to, but my spirit has never been more alive. There are days when you drop the spoon, when your knees ache in the morning, when getting up from the chair feels like a small mountain, when the stairs look taller than they used to, and the mirror shows you someone you barely recognize. There's a pause, a quiet ache, not just in the bones, but in the heart. Is this what it means to fade? But here's the gentle truth. Your body is softening, yes, but your presence is becoming more radiant. Herb Buddhism teaches us, the body is not who you are. It's the temple, not the monk. Asterisk, asterisk. The Buddha referred to the body as a borrowed form, temporary, changing, like a wave in motion. It houses the spirit, but it is not the spirit itself. Just like the candle is not the flame, just like the cup is not the tea. As the cup grows old, maybe chipped, maybe cracked, it still holds what matters. Your hands may tremble now, but the compassion they offer is steadier than ever. Your steps may slow, but your wisdom moves quicker, deeper, softer. You are not fading. You are becoming pure flame. Dove a story. The candle at sunrise. There was once a monk who lit a candle every morning at 5 a.m. He watched it flicker, watched it burn, and at sunrise, he blew it out. One day a novice asked, "Why light it if you'll just put it out?" The monk smiled, because the purpose of the candle is not how long it lasts, but how clearly it burns, before the sun rises. So it is with our bodies. They are not meant to last forever. They are meant to help us shine while we are here. Person in lotus position, medium skin tone, being with the body, without judgment. You don't have to pretend it doesn't hurt. You don't have to fight the aging. You don't have to silence the frustration, but you can sit with it. You can place a hand on the joint that aches and whisper, "Thank you for all the years you carried me." You don't have to be perfect now, just present. That's what the body wants. Not judgment, but gentle presence. Sheaf of rice, slowing down is not failure. It's an invitation. Asterisk, asterisk. When the body can no longer rush, you begin to notice the small things, the wind through a curtain, the warmth of tea in your palms, the quiet joy of just waking up. Youth teaches you how to run. Aging teaches you how to stay. And the body, though quieter now, is still the greatest teacher of impermanence. It reminds you, this won't last. So be here. Prayer beads, a daily blessing for the body. Each morning before you rise, place your hands over your chest and belly. Breathe and say, "This body has changed. This body has softened. And still it holds light." Repeat as many times as you need, not to change anything, but to honor it. Because this body, with all its creaks and slowness, is sacred. It is not a burden. It is a blessing. In a quieter voice, Cherry Blossom, you are not your reflection. You are what's looking into the mirror. Asterisk, asterisk. Your skin may be thinner now, but your compassion is thicker. Your eyes may squint more, but your vision for what matters is sharper. Your bones may ache, but your spirit moves freely. So when you look in the mirror, don't search for the old version of yourself. Smile and say, Hello, beloved. I see you, even more clearly now, because as the outer form fades, the inner presence begins to glow. In the next part, we'll turn toward a tender truth, the dreams that didn't happen, the people we lost, the versions of life that never came to be, but not to mourn, to sit with them, breathe through them, and find peace in what still is. But for now, hold your body gently, like a wise friend, like a fading candle, like something sacred. I may be slower, but I am still here, and the light in me has never gone out. Part 5, Grieving what will never be, and finding peace in what is. There's a kind of grief that doesn't arrive all at once. It's not loud. It doesn't knock on your door in the middle of the night. Instead, it lingers. It sits quietly at the edge of your morning coffee. It follows you through empty hallways. It appears in the smallest moments, when you hear a song that once meant something, or when you see an old photo of yourself, smiling at a version of the future that never came. This isn't the grief of loss you can name. It's the grief of what never was, the path you didn't walk, the dream you gave up, the words you never got to say, the person you almost became, but life somehow led you elsewhere. And now, in these quieter years, that version of you still echoes, not loudly, but enough to bring a soft ache. You may be sitting in the warmth of the present, surrounded by enough, and still feel the shadow of, what if? What if I had chosen differently? What if I had left earlier? What if I had stayed longer? What if I had said yes or no? At first, it feels selfish to think this way. You remind yourself how much you have. You count your blessings. You whisper, I shouldn't feel this. I have so much. But Buddhism teaches us that awareness is not ungrateful. Grieving the life that never happened does not mean you don't appreciate the one you have. It means you are finally becoming still enough to meet all versions of yourself, even the ones that never arrived. You're not asking for a different life. You're simply learning to hold the full weight of the one you've lived. And sometimes that includes mourning, the doors that closed before you even knocked. Maybe you once wanted to be an artist. Maybe you dreamed of living by the ocean. Maybe you hoped for more time with someone you loved. Maybe you thought by now you'd feel more whole. But instead, life took you somewhere else. And now, instead of running, instead of reaching, you sit with that ache. And you breathe. You let it hurt, gently, like a soft bruise. Not to fix it, but to feel it, without turning away. You place a hand over your heart and whisper to that younger version of you, I'm sorry things didn't turn out the way we once hoped, but I haven't forgotten. You still live in me, and I am not ashamed of your dreams. And slowly, something shifts, because when we grieve what never was, we make space for what is. We unclench. We stop editing our stories. We accept the jagged edges, the half-finished chapters, the pages that got torn out somewhere along the way. And in that honesty, peace begins. Not the kind of peace that comes from perfection, but the kind that comes from telling the truth and still choosing to stay. You sit by the window and you realize this life, this exact, imperfect, beautiful, messy life is enough. You may not have become the artist, but you still create, in meals you cook with love, in stories you pass down, in the way you listen to someone's silence, and say, I'm here. You may not have lived by the sea, but maybe the sound of wind in the trees is a kind of ocean, and maybe your breath rising and falling is the tide you were meant to learn. You may not have been fully understood, but maybe the understanding you give now, to your grandchildren, to your partner, to strangers, is the reflection of the compassion you once longed for. The grief doesn't go away, but it softens, like water in your hands. You stop trying to hold it. You just let it move through. And suddenly, you're not drowning. You're floating. There's a Japanese practice called wabi-sabi, a way of seeing beauty in imperfection. Cracks are not flaws. They are where the gold goes. And so is your life. The cracks, The missing pieces, the chapters that were never written, they are not your failure. They are where your light shines through now. You may feel sadness from time to time. That's okay. Sadness is not the opposite of peace. It's the doorway to presence. Let yourself feel it. Feel the weight of the dreams that didn't come. Then look around. Notice what did. The warmth of your cup. The birds singing in the distance. The softness of your body still breathing. The sunlight resting on your skin. These moments are not lesser. They are real. They are this life. The one you're living. Not a version. Not a draft. But the sacred, ordinary, actual life. And when you accept what never came, you finally begin to see how much beauty lives in what remains. So tonight, as you sit quietly before bed, place a hand over your chest, breathe, and whisper, I forgive the life that never happened. I bless the one I'm living now, and I will make peace with both. Part 6. Loving with open hands, compassion in late life. You spend much of your early life loving with a kind of urgency. You love to protect, to keep close, to fix, to hold tight. You tell your children to call when they get home. You worry when your partner doesn't text back. You replay conversations in your head, trying to get them just right. There's a tenderness in this kind of love, but there's also a quiet panic underneath. A fear that if you don't hold on tightly enough, they might disappear. And sometimes they do. People change. They leave. They grow. They pass away. And it hurts so deeply sometimes you begin to believe the ache is proof you loved well. But what if there's another way? What if the deepest form of love isn't holding on, it's letting go with care? What if love in these later years isn't a grasp, but an open palm? Buddhism teaches us that true compassion, karu, is not about possessing another. It's about the willingness to see them clearly and wish them well, even when they walk away from you, especially then. It is the kind of love that doesn't say, stay with me, but whispers, may you be safe wherever you are. There's a kind of maturity that comes with age, not the kind you learn from books, but the kind etched into your body through experience. You begin to realize that love doesn't always look like closeness. Sometimes, love looks like releasing a grudge after years of holding it. Sometimes it looks like not correcting someone, even when you're right. Sometimes it's sitting quietly beside a friend and saying nothing at all, because love doesn't always need to be spoken. It just needs to be offered, freely, like water, like light, like breath. You begin to see that the more you let go, the more your heart opens. You don't need people to respond the way you expect. You don't need your children to visit as often. You don't need the past to change. You don't even need people to understand you completely. You just need to love, without asking for anything in return. And that's where real peace lies. There's a story of an old woman in a small village who used to bake bread every Friday. She would place the warm loaves in a basket and leave them at the edge of the forest. No note, no name. When someone asked her why, she said, I don't need to know who's hungry. I only need to keep feeding the world in the way I can. That is compassion. Not waiting for applause, not needing thanks, just doing what the heart knows how to do. Give. In late life, you become like her. Your love becomes quieter, but it becomes more real. You write letters even when they won't write back. You bless people in your thoughts. You smile at strangers in line. You offer kindness to those who cannot repay you, because you're not trying to build anything anymore. You're trying to leave gently, not in body, but in spirit. You want to leave traces of care in every room you pass through, not because anyone asked you to, but because you know what love costs, and you're no longer afraid to spend it. You stop loving to be loved. You start loving to love, and that changes everything. At night, you might think of someone who once hurt you. You no longer feel the burn, just a quiet sigh. You might whisper, I hope they're okay. And that one sentence, that one small release, is a lifetime of practice blooming at last. It's compassion, not because they deserve it, but because you do, because your heart has become more spacious than ever, not because it wasn't broken, but because it was. And in the cracks, light got in, and now you give that light freely. There is a practice in Buddhism called metta, loving kindness meditation. It starts with the self. May I be safe. May I be well. May I live with ease. And then it expands to someone you love, to someone neutral, to someone difficult, to all beings. That is what your love has become now. A circle, widening, no need to hold, just to bless. You may not have all the energy you once did, but what you do have now is the clearest kind of love, one that asks nothing and offers everything. So the next time you see someone walk away, in distance, in disagreement, in death, place your hand over your heart, close your eyes, and whisper, I release you with love. I do not need to keep you, to continue loving you. And then feel the breath return, gentle, spacious, enough, because you are loving, with open hands now. And that, dear one, is the deepest kind of holding. Part 7, Death as the Gentle Teacher, walking toward the end with peace. There comes a point in life when the end is no longer just an idea. It's not something that happens to other people. It begins to feel real, not always frightening, but undeniably present, like a shadow that doesn't move with the sun anymore. It's there even in stillness, especially in stillness. And yet, there is a strange comfort in that. When you're younger, death feels like a thief, something that might come in the night and steal everything you love. You avoid it. You fill your days with noise, movement, effort, as if staying busy might keep it at bay. But now, something in you has grown quieter. You're not trying to outrun it. You're trying to understand it, maybe even sit beside it, like a neighbor who always waved from a distance, but whom you never really spoke to. Buddhism does not treat death as an enemy. It treats it as a teacher, a gentle, patient, uncompromising teacher, one who reminds us, again and again, this will not last. This body will return to the earth. This breath will stop. This name will fade. But what you loved, what you gave, how you were present, that leaves a trace deeper than stone. And so you begin to ask different questions. Not, how long do I have left? But, what kind of presence am I becoming? What kind of peace am I preparing? You start noticing things you never did before. The way the light changes at 5 p.m., the silence between two birds calling to each other, the warmth of your own hand against your chest, the simple truth that you are here, still breathing, and that, for this moment, is enough. There's a story of an old monk who prepared his death like one prepares a meal, not hurried, not afraid, but with presence, with care. Each day he would sweep his hut, fold his robe, and offer a single bowl of rice to the sky. When asked why, he said, because one day will be my last day doing these things, and I want them to remember me smiling. There's something in that simplicity that strips away the fear, not because we've solved the mystery of death, but because we've stopped demanding answers from it. We no longer need to know what comes after. We simply need to be here now, so that when it does come, we are not surprised. We are not resentful. We are not clinging to one more task. We are ready, not because we finished everything, but because we loved what we were doing. And when the body fails, as it will, we don't see it as betrayal. We see it as a conversation reaching its natural pause, like music ending on the final note, not because it ran out of sound, but because the song was complete. There is no fear in that, only release, only return. Aging in this light becomes a kind of spiritual preparation, not for the afterlife, but for this very moment, for the letting go that happens a little each day. The breath gets shallower, the steps get slower, the thoughts take longer to arrive, and somehow, it all feels more sacred. You no longer rush, you observe, you notice the world happening without your effort, and you begin to trust that life continues, with or without you. And that is not something to fear, that is something to bow to. There's a practice in Buddhism called Maranasati, mindfulness of death. It is not morbid. It is luminous. It invites us to remember, not out of fear, but out of love, not to worry, but to appreciate. So you sit, you breathe, and you say quietly to yourself, "This could be my last breath. Let it be soft. Let it be kind." Not because you are dying, but because living with that awareness makes every moment more tender. And one day, when the breath truly does become your last, you will not fight it. You will not beg for one more. You will smile, because you didn't just live. You were awake. You were kind. You were forgiving. You were not perfect, but you were real, and you let love pass through you, without holding it hostage. So when the time comes, you'll walk toward the door, not with fear in your chest, but with space, with a heart unburdened, with a whisper of gratitude, because this life, in all its impermanence, was enough, and you will have left not just memories, but presence, not just a name, but a light. And that, dear one, is the kind of death that teaches the living how to truly live. Part 8. You are the sky. Coming home to the vastness within. There comes a moment when you've let go of enough. The regrets, the roles, the rushing, the fear of death, even the need to be someone. And what's left is not emptiness, but space, stillness, a gentle kind of presence that feels less like a self and more like a sky. For most of your life, you were the weather, the storm of plans, the sun of your successes, the cold winds of sorrow, the heavy clouds of confusion, always shifting, always reacting. But now, you begin to realize you were never just the weather. You were the sky all along, the one who held it, the one who watched it move, the one who stayed open, no matter what passed through. And that changes everything. You no longer panic when sadness visits. You no longer hold your joy too tightly. You no longer fear the quiet, because you know, it's all passing, all of it, even you, and still, something deeper remains. Buddhism teaches that the true self is not a thing. It's not a fixed identity. It's awareness, spacious, unbound, vast like the sky. It cannot be owned, cannot be named, can only be returned to. And old age, strangely enough, makes that return possible. The outer world begins to ask less of you. The inner world begins to speak more clearly. You stop needing to prove anything. You stop needing to be anything. And in that stillness, you discover yourself, not as a person, but as presence. You are not the memories, not the regrets, not even the body that's changing day by day. You are what holds it all. You are the vastness in which life happens, and you begin to live from that space. You listen without rushing to respond. You breathe without needing to fix anything. You feel without needing to explain. You watch others live their lives and love them through it without interfering, because you've finally made peace with the truth. You were never meant to control the story. You were meant to hold it with grace. There's a Zen saying, "The sky doesn't cling to the clouds, and yet it allows them to pass freely." You become like that, letting others come and go, letting your thoughts rise and fall, letting your body do what it needs to do, letting the world change without needing to be in the center of it. And instead of feeling small, you feel whole, because when you stop being the character in the story, you remember you are the space in which the story unfolds. And there is great peace in that. You begin to wake up with fewer desires, not because you've given up, but because you've come home. You no longer want to add anything. You just want to be fully here for what already is. The sound of birds, the warmth of sunlight on your hands, the softness of your breath, the quiet company of your own heart. These are not small things. They are the true treasures, and you don't need to chase them. They arrive when you sit still. There's a story of a monk who, when asked what he had learned after 50 years of practice, simply replied, "I learned that I am not the wind. I am the open window." That is what you've become. A window to awareness. A space where life moves freely, but nothing sticks, nothing stains, nothing stays. And that is not sadness. That is liberation. You no longer need to defend yourself. You no longer need to prove your worth. You no longer need to be seen, because you are light, and light does not need permission to shine. So now, in this final part of your journey, you sit, not because there's nothing left to do, but because you've done enough. And now it's time to simply be. The sky never finishes being the sky. It just continues. And so will you, not as a name, not as a body, but as presence. First, kind, awake. When your loved ones speak of you, they may not remember every word you said, but they will remember the peace you brought into a room, the way you listened, the way you smiled without needing anything, the way you were still. And in that stillness, you left something behind, not legacy, but light. And maybe that's all this life ever asked of you, to become so empty that you could finally be full, to become so quiet that truth could speak, to become so spacious that love could move through you without anything in the way. And now, you are the sky, and nothing that passes through you can ever take that away. And now, you've walked through impermanence, not as something to fear, but as something to rest in. You've grieved what never was. You've blessed what is. You've listened to your body change without making it wrong. You've met death and called it teacher. And above all, you've begun to feel the presence that remains when everything else falls away. You are not the storm. You are not the name. You are not the role or the weight of memories. You are the sky, spacious, unshaken, still. So wherever you are now, perhaps wrapped in a quiet evening, or sitting beside a sleeping pet, or alone with your tea, place a hand over your chest and whisper, I am not what I lose. I am what remains. What part of this journey spoke to your heart? I invite you to share your reflection in the comments. Sometimes what you release becomes someone else's peace. And if you'd like to keep walking gently with us, subscribe. Here we don't chase the path. We breathe it. This is Lotus Light Teachings. And you, beloved one, are already the light.